Mortgage insurance is always a hot topic, and Mason does a really good job of discussing this with all of our borrowers. Reality is it's not really quite the same for everybody. It's going to be factored in on what your credit score is, what you're putting from a down payment, and just how much you're borrowing into how much you can support. Lots of times mortgage insurance is like $40 a month. So one thing that we'll always try to show our borrowers is like, hey, does it really make sense for you to bring in $60,000 extra dollars to this transaction to avoid mortgage insurance payment for the next 2 years while you wait for your home to appreciate? And oftentimes when we show that, it at least gives a different light, right? Because there's so many times in like the Dave Ramsey world where they want you to say, you can't buy a home without 20% down. And the reality is the mortgage insurance impact is pretty small. As far as if you have it, you're either making 2 full years of payments while you're waiting for your home to appreciate, and you can look to get it removed from there, or more often than not, you're doing it just through a refinance.
First thing you want to look at is what you're spending to get into the home. And what we've always talked about with our clients is don't spend $1 more out of your pocket to get into the home that you want to buy at the payment that you're comfortable with, right? And whether that payment includes mortgage insurance or not, I don't really care, because over time you can get that mortgage insurance removed. But to your point, if you're buying a $700,000 home and you want to put $35,000 down and you can get to your monthly payment you're comfortable with versus putting $140,000 down, well then put 35 and let the rest of that money work elsewhere, right? And you can even offset if your mortgage payment is, $4,000 and $300 of that is your mortgage insurance. Well, you just saved $100,000 or more. Spend that for the next couple of years on offsetting that payment by the $300 for the mortgage insurance, while the rest of that money invests, and you're good all day long in terms of coming out better financially. When it comes to the removal piece, market's going to dictate that, right? Like a typical mortgage insurance policy has a 10-year shelf life where you have it for a full 10 years. However, what we've seen over the last decade is rapid appreciation in our market, where typically most of our clients are getting it removed sometime between 18 to 36 months.
Mortgage lenders look at self-employed borrowers quite a bit different than W-2. W-2 is looked at a lot more cookie cutter, right? Like what you're making, what your salary is, what your hourly wage is, whatever, right? It's just pretty cut and dry. One thing that I see lots of times self-employed borrowers do is really focus on making sure that they're claiming as little as possible, so they're paying as little as they can in taxes, right? That's kind of everyone's goal. That's why accountants are in business. The big downfall if you're looking to buy in the next year is if the same income that you're claiming on that tax returns is the exact same income that we're looking at to figure out what you can afford to buy. Obviously, there's a couple things that you can add back in, but if you're really getting that down as low as you possibly can, you could really be negatively impacting yourself. Typically, we'll try to have the conversation with them like, hey, talk to your accountant. If you're planning on buying in the next year, make sure that they're on the same page. So what you're claiming is putting you in the best possible position to buy the home that you're seeking. Oftentimes we'll review drafts of tax returns just to make sure that it pencils for them before they file anything, and just make sure that they're not shooting themselves in the foot by what they're claiming.
Like a salary employee, if you're at $100,000 a year in salary, you're $8,300 a month in income.
Yep.
That's a math equation.
Yep.
Self-employed client, you're looking at the last 2 years of tax returns. Within those tax returns, you're going to have write-offs. You're going to have ways that your accountant's trying to lower your tax liability. The challenge is there's only certain write-offs that can be added back to your income. Oftentimes we'll meet somebody like, oh, I'm making $100,000 as a self-employed entrepreneur, but the reality is their net number is significantly lower than that. And if they're not doing the diligence and working with the lender, it's going to really unpack that. They could put themselves in trouble going out there and writing an offer with a pre-qual from an online lender who didn't actually do the diligence. And now you're contractually obligated to a property and an earnest money deposit that you might not be able to qualify for. So the big difference is the diligence. I think the one that we talk about most commonly is like the quote unquote house hack, right? That first time buyer getting into their home for as little as possible, right? So oftentimes you're talking about maybe even zero down payment assistance, whatever, or a 3 to 5% down payment. But most people don't think about is how they can essentially rinse and repeat that cycle with their next home and their next home. So what we've really leaned into is helping people understand that opportunity where you buy your first home, and it's oftentimes, especially in our market, which is challenging from a price standpoint, it's not the dream home, right? But it's a great home to get into. You find it at a budget you can afford, and then you fast forward 12 to 24 months later and you do it again, right? And the key there is when you're buying your primary residence, you're signing a piece of paper that says you live there for 12 months, not anything longer than that. So at month 13, if you want to go buy another primary residence and you can qualify for that property while using this one as a rental, go do it again. It gets really fun when you start to build equity and you start to leverage the equity out of that home into the next one or into the third one. And what we've seen time and time again is usually by home 3 or 4, that becomes the forever home because you've tapped into the equity a couple of times. And if you look at that across our typical, market price point, all of a sudden you have $2.5–3 million worth of real estate assets in your portfolio.
The one thing that I think gets maybe under-realized is that unlike most other investments, your home's going to appreciate kind of irregardless of what you put into it. Yeah. If you buy your home for $500,000 in cash, or if you buy it zero down with down payment assistance, that same home is going to appreciate the exact same. It's not tied to what you put into it. It's not like the S&P 500 where you're only getting your investment on what you put down. So really that can be one way that you can really leverage the dollars you have to acquire as many properties as possible. So it's not something on a purchase that you can roll into your loan. It's something that you should kind of allocate for. Rule of thumb is usually anywhere from 3 to 6% of the purchase. Really, the best way to get it covered is through negotiating it within your purchase and sale. Typically, that's going to be paid for by the seller out of their proceeds. So really, you're going to be looking for a home that's been on the market for a couple weeks. Maybe a really eager seller that's willing to contribute it. And we've definitely worked on strategies to find like kind of the perfect offer price where the seller can cover some of the costs, but still really focused on their net number so your deal wins.
People are always asking like, how do I negotiate costs into the price? And what they don't understand is our market supports, escalations very regularly from a value standpoint. What we've been able to do over the last couple of years now is help people elevate that price slightly, but use those additional funds that would go to the seller as proceeds to buy down their interest rate to actually qualify for more home. Yeah. So the seller still gets their same net number or potentially even a little bit more, and the buyer has actually increased their buying power in a higher rate environment. And it creates this really nice kind of symbiotic strategy that everybody gets on board with because it's a win-win for each person.
Yeah, they can keep their payment the same, afford more of a house, and make their offer stand out a little bit more.
Spend a little less money, exactly.
It makes sense to refinance whenever, we usually just leverage data for a refinance. A refinance is super easy. It either makes sense or it doesn't. So what I mean by that is like, if you're going to be able to, if your goal is to get your payment down by X amount, we can model out exactly what that looks like now. Or if you're trying to pay off X amount in credit card debt that's costing you 24% or whatever, we can show you exactly what you're paying on your current debt load and what a new mortgage looks like. And then the data will tell us, right? If you're saving $150 in interest a month, your payment as a net is going down, it makes sense all day. If it doesn't, then it doesn't.
I think we've had a couple times over the last few years where, in a higher rate environment, everybody's like, oh, my mortgage is at 3%, 3.5%, whatever. And yeah, a cash out refi might be at 7.25%. You look at the last 12 months, for example. But I think of a couple of clients right off the bat where their debt load, because consumer debt has risen so rapidly after the pandemic, their debt load had put them in a position where their overall cash flow was just really impactful to their lifestyle. Yeah. And even though we took them from a 3 to a 7, we saved them, over $1,000. I know a couple of like $1,300 or more, which was meaningful for their quality of life and accomplishing their other goals. So again, to refinance, to your point, makes sense, but it depends on how it makes sense because of what your goals are. If you save money, maybe that's lowering your rate, maybe it's paying off debt. We have a lot of people that want to buy more homes and accumulate more wealth in real estate, so we leverage the equity there. It's all about the goals and then using the data to model around it to make sure that it's going to fit.